The Detroit Lions are 7-1 after a 24-14 win over the Packers in Week 9 and have won 6 straight games. Since their Week 5 bye, they have outscored their opponents by a combined score of 154-66. They have 3 double-digit wins in their past 4 games, with 2 of those wins being by 38 points. This is without a doubt one of the most complete rosters in all of football, and if the past few weeks have proven anything, they are the best team in the NFC, and I don't think it's particularly close. And because of this, the NFC runs through the Motor City. This has been a long road over the past few years to get where we are now, but the Lions are 7-1 for the first time since the 1950s, and despite them being 7-1, they have not played their best offense over the past couple of games, yet outscored their opponents 76-28 in the last 2 games. And it's obviously not because their offense isn't good, of course, it's because they haven't had to beat teams the way we know they can. And to be honest, I think that makes the Lions even scarier, knowing they can put up a flurry of points and it doesn't need to rely solely on Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, or whoever. This team is downright scary, and in today's video we're going to break down why the NFC runs through Detroit and discuss other contending teams in the NFC. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by breaking down what makes the Lions so good, and the answer is, well, pretty much everything. Losing a player like Aiden Hutchinson would have been detrimental for a lot of teams, and don't get me wrong, the Lions are certainly feeling the loss of Hutch, as every team would, but they are doing fine without him. And the big thing that has to be remembered even with losing Hutch is, as long as the defense holds the opponent to under 24 points, the Lions are going to win most games. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a very good player, and he had over 110 receptions for over 1,500 yards and double-digit touchdowns in 2023, yet has just 464 receiving yards through the first 8 games of the 2024 season. That's no slight at Amon-Ra or to say he's fallen off a cliff, it's just hard to get the football in an offense that has playmakers everywhere. Jameson Williams has also taken a step this year, which has been nice to see, and Sam Laporta is also a very good tight end too. And like with Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta's stats are not what they were in 2023 because the offense is so diverse and they haven't had to rely on him as much as Laporta fantasy owners would have liked through the first 8 games. And it also hurts both Amon-Ra and Laporta's numbers when Jared Goff cumulatively has 230 passing yards total in the last 2 games because every other part of the team was doing their job and then some. What also gets lost in the Lions beating teams the way they have recently is they are top 4 in the league in turnovers on both sides of the football. They have a plus 11 turnover margin just 8 games into the season, and 2 of their 5 turnovers came in the Bucs game back in week 2. And every team has a bad game here or there, and it's a part of football, and no team is perfect. But the Lions more than doubled Tampa's yardage in that game as they outgained them 463-216, and that was a very rare game where the Lions had a couple of mental miscues. They had a too many men on the field penalty to end the first half in Tampa's red zone, which certainly left points on the board, and later in the game, Jared Goff threw an interception in the 4th quarter in Tampa territory. Those are the 2 main reasons as to why the Lions are not 8-0, and one of the biggest reasons why the NFC runs through Detroit is teams know they have to play near perfect to beat this team. And even in the Week 7 game against Minnesota, the Lions basically spotted the Vikings 10 points in the first 5 minutes of the game, yet came back and beat them. This included multiple 30-plus yard touchdowns from the Lions, and the Vikings' big break in this game was a defensive touchdown by Ivan Pace, but I thought the Lions handled this game a lot better than a mere 2-point win would suggest. And to go back to the teams having to play near perfect to beat them point, every NFL team knows this, and you can almost see teams start to press once they get down, and their backs are against the wall. Good teams take advantage of opportunities, and I don't know if there's a team that represents taking advantage of opportunities more than the Lions. There's no stat to show this, but when the Lions create a turnover defensively, it's almost like the entire team gets an energy boost, and you can see the team get energized from the turnover and get ready to go score a touchdown with any of their 5 offensive playmakers in Gibbs, Montgomery, St. Brown, Williams, or Laporta. And as if having those guys isn't enough, they also have one of the best offensive offensive lines in football, which is led by Penei Sewell. Penei is only 24 years old and is already a two-time Pro Bowler, and I don't think this should be a hot take, but if he stays healthy, he is definitely on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He was a once every few year offensive tackle prospect coming out of Oregon, and he plays like that every single Sunday. It's one thing to have good offensive players, but it's another to be able to fully maximize what you can do with the offensive talent. And believe it or not, as simple as that idea is, it's not as common as you may think. And there are a lot of NFL teams that wish they had Ben Johnson as their team's head coach. And look no further than the Bears and what they have currently going on with not only Caleb Williams, but the entire team. There is no doubt that the Bears fan base and probably players within the organization wish that Ben Johnson was their head coach right now instead of Matt Eberflus. The Lions maximize what they can do really every week, and I know the yardage hasn't been there over the past couple of games against the Titans and Packers, but it's because the defense and special teams specifically have stepped up in a big way over the past two games, and to me, that's a sign of a great team really kind of destined to make a deep postseason run, because they're not one-dimensional. They're not basically saying, hey, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, if you guys don't get going this week, guys, it's going to be tough to win. Not even close. Now, the Lions obviously do a great job of running the football, and they haven't had less than 115 rushing yards as a team in any game this year, but they're not one-dimensional, and that's another reason as to why they are so difficult to beat. But one other fact that you guys may not know is the Lions have two running backs in the top 4 in the NFL in rushing touchdowns, and that kind of almost seems like a made-up stat, with both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs having 7 rushing touchdowns apiece. The Lions' schedule down the stretch really isn't all that difficult, and they play the Houston Texans in Week 10, and before the season started, that would have seemed like a very difficult game, especially as it is on the road, and it's not going to be easy, but the Texans do not have Stephon Diggs. Their offensive line is obviously a mess, and Nico Collins still will not play in this game, so the Texans are down a couple of players, and to be honest, I think the Lions would have won this game regardless. Yes, they have a couple of other tough games like Buffalo, and they play Green Bay again as well. Both of those games are at home, by the way, and they even play the Vikings at home in Week 18, but I don't look at any game, even the at San Francisco game on Monday night in Week 17, where I look at this game and automatically circle a loss for the Detroit Lions. This is not a Carolina Panthers at Kansas City Chiefs where I think, okay, good luck Bryce Young or Andy Dalton against a Steve Spagnuolo defense because you're going to need it. Not even close. The Lions are the team you circle on other calendars that, hey, they are going to lose this game because they are playing the Detroit Lions. This team is absolutely loaded, and it's not just on the offensive side of the ball. We talked about the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, and obviously that's huge, and while I make this video, they have not made a trade for an edge rusher. If in the chance that they make a trade while I'm editing the video, I will have a text on the screen right now, but the Lions are still top 5 in points allowed per game, and believe it or not, they have allowed 15 points or less in 3 of the last 4 games they've played. Sure, they may rank 22nd in total yards allowed defensively, but they come up with timely turnovers, and we saw that in the Green Bay game in Week 9. The Kirby Joseph pick 6, to me, is kind of the epitome of the 2024 Detroit Lions. You're playing a big game, you need somebody to step up, and somebody does. You don't have to have Amon-Ra go for 110 yards every week just to have a fighting chance. You can have games where Amon-Ra has 34 yards, 42 yards, 27 yards, and you can go 3-0 and have 3 double-digit wins because the Lions have players on players on players. And we discussed this during the 2024 team preview, but they remind me a lot of the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, where you look at that roster and say, Clinton Portis, Santana Moss, Jeremy Shockey, and the names just go on, and even on the defense, Sean Taylor, Antrell Roll, Vince Wilfork, and they had 17 first-round picks on that team, and my point is, with the Lions, it's just a name of guys that you can keep going. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson, and you get the point. Guys, this team is absolutely loaded, and if they do not get to the Super Bowl, I would be pretty surprised because it's going to almost require them to beat themselves, and I think in a weird way that them losing to the 49ers the way they did last year with going for it multiple times in the second half and the way that they lost that game will prove to be beneficial in the long run because they're going to know the mistakes they made last year and they're not going to repeat them the second time around. There's a couple of other reasons why I believe the NFC runs through the Motor City, and it's not just because the Lions are a great team. Other teams across the conference are having down years, and the San Francisco 49ers are a good example. The 49ers are 4-4, and I don't think anybody would deny that they have the potential to be a great team, but they've had a lot of unfortunate things happen to them throughout the first few months of the year that I personally think their chances of winning a Super Bowl, at least with this current roster, are over. Now, I do want to clarify that the Lions were my preseason pick to go to the Super Bowl before the season started, but the 49ers having Dre Greenlaw out for most of the year, Javon Hargrave having a season-ending injury, Christian McCaffrey not playing at all through 8 games, Brandon Ayuk tearing his ACL, and the list goes on, competitively helps the Lions and other teams in the conference. Every team, of course, has to deal with injuries, some more than others, but this really puts the 49ers behind the 8 ball, and keep in mind, they already have 4 losses. They also have a handful of difficult games down the stretch of this year, like at Green Bay, at Buffalo, and even home against the Lions, and for me to really buy in with the 49ers and to think they have any chance of beating the Lions in the playoffs for the second straight year, which, by the way, required a lot for them just to beat them once, I think the game would have to be played in San Francisco. And that almost requires the Lions to lose 4 more games down the stretch, and for the 49ers to get the number 1 seed in the conference, and I don't think that's going to happen. The 49ers would be down both Javon Hargrave and Brandon Ayuk if they went to Detroit in the playoffs, and to beat this team, you can't be down 2 of your best players on the road in a hostile environment with the season on the line. And in some ways, I think the 49ers are done unless they do not have to encounter the Lions in the postseason, which is seemingly impossible. I don't see anybody going into Detroit and winning in the postseason, and I do think this team will be the number 1 seed in the conference, which goes back to the point of the NFC running through the Motor City. Going into Detroit is already a tough place to play, but one team I think could cause some problems for the Lions is the Green Bay Packers. I know the Lions just beat the Packers and by double digits, but I don't think you can automatically assume division games are done and that nobody stands a chance. These teams know each other well, and I think it is worth noting Green Bay was not close to healthy in this game, and especially their quarterback Jordan Love. Now, just because I think the Packers could give them a game in January does not mean I would pick Green Bay to win, because I wouldn't. I would pick Detroit to beat Green Bay, especially if the game was played at Ford Field, but I don't think it's an easy win by any means. The big thing for Green Bay that concerns me, whether they are playing the Lions or the worst team in the league, is you never know when Jordan Love is going to have a bad play that could potentially cost you the game. And while I think Jordan is a very, very talented player, it is extremely frustrating knowing there's a Brett Favre-esque play in him at seemingly any point. Again, I do think the Lions would win, but the Packers have a very good defense, and they have forced 19 turnovers in 9 games, and have 7 games where they've forced multiple turnovers, and I think they will be a tough out in January. The Minnesota Vikings started out 5-0 before dropping back-to-back games to the Lions and Rams, and they have an easy part of their schedule at the moment as they play a couple of AFC South teams, then play the Bears, and then play a combination of the Falcons and Cardinals, and the Vikings can win a lot of those games, and it wouldn't surprise me if they start the year 11-2 or 11-3 or something along those lines, and there is a chance that the Vikings are the 5 seed in the playoffs and would set them up for a game against the Lions if they win in the wildcard round against another division opponent, against the Lions maybe in the divisional round of the playoffs. But I don't think the Vikings are going to go into Ford Field in the divisional round of the playoffs with the Lions as the number 1 seed and beat this team. Right now, the Lions have their number. They have beat them 4 straight times, which was the first time this has happened in over 60 years, but the fact of the matter is, right now, the Lions have their number. They constantly put up numbers against a Brian Flores defense, and they did so as they put up 31 points, and at a point, scored 21 straight after putting themselves down in a 10-0 hole. I do think the Vikings are a solid team, and I think they can win a playoff game, but I wouldn't trust a Sam Darnold-led team on the road in Detroit with the season on the line to go in and actually, beat the Lions. The Eagles are, to me, right now, the second most talented team in the NFC, behind the Lions, of course, but guys, I have to be honest, they scare me for several reasons. There are countless times times within games where Nick Sirianni gets too cute, and most recently against the Jags, there were a couple of examples, not one, but multiple within the same game, where this game shouldn't have been close. And if you are making those mistakes against the Jags in a game that you only won by 5, that you probably should have won by, we'll conservatively say 10, if not more, those are concerns that I'm going to have throughout the rest of the season, and I don't think they're just magically going to go away. Now, I will say for the sake of Eagles fans that the one call with Saquon was obviously not in their favor, and that should have been called, but the decision to not push on 4th and 1, and then the 57-yard field goal when I thought they should have punted the ball or even went for it, I would have had the 57-yard field goal last out of the 3 options. Those are decisions that Nick Sirianni routinely makes, and while the Eagles roster is obviously talented, I have a lot of concerns with the coaching staff, and that's not going to go anywhere because, let's just be honest, he's not going to get fired mid-season when they are on their way to probably getting into the postseason and maybe even being the number 2 seed in the conference. The Washington Commanders are 7-2 for the first time since 1996, and while the Commanders' story has been awesome this year, and I'm very happy for them and their fan base, I think it would be very, very tall to ask a rookie Jaden Daniels to go on the road in, at that point, what would probably be the NFC Championship game, to go into Detroit and beat the Lions. So the Commanders have, by every definition, overachieved this year, and again, I'm happy for them, but without their star defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, who is out for the year, I would expect Ben Johnson to pound the rock against that team and pound the rock until they prove they can stop it. And again, I'm happy for the Commanders. I just don't think Super Bowl in Jaden Daniels' rookie year is really a realistic option. A couple of other NFC West teams, the Seahawks scare me a lot, especially with the right side of their offensive line, and I think that is going to continue to be a problem for the remainder of the 24 season, and until they really address that, I am kind of out on Seattle, at least making it further than the wild card round of the playoffs. Arizona has been a really good team in 2024, and I think there's a chance that they start out 6-4 with the upcoming games that they have, but we saw the Lions go out to the desert and beat them a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think the Cardinals are going to, in what is effectively year 1 of the rebuild, because they didn't have Kyler Murray for most of last year, and go into Detroit and win a playoff game. One team that I think could cause the Lions problems is the Los Angeles Rams. They nearly beat them last year in the postseason, and they are a very, very tough team to beat when healthy, and that's going to be the big thing for the Rams, is can they stay healthy for the remainder of the year? Because if they can, then they are going to be a very difficult team to beat when it matters. But that's going to be kind of a tall task in itself, although I hope the Rams do, because they are a very fun team to watch, and they are one of the more complete teams in the NFL, and they can certainly cause problems not just for the Lions, but for other NFL teams too, and other NFC teams, and the Rams making it to the NFC Championship game wouldn't surprise me at all. But for now, the NFC runs through the city of Detroit. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 42% of people watching are subscribed. It helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.